It's possible to get a law school to pay you up to $200,000 to enroll because of one number on a public spreadsheet and what that number does for them. Today, I'm going to share with you why every law school in the country is trapped within this framework and how a small number of applicants follows that framework, walks out with a free ride, and lets everybody else pay sticker. Now, I've been teaching the LSAT since 2005. I read those American Bar Association filings that most applicants never even open. And the most useful thing I can tell you about how admissions works is this. Your LSAT score is the most important part of your application. Law schools don't really care how you reason. They care what your LSAT score does for their numbers. Now, every spring, the national US News Law School rankings come out. Every law school in the country gets sorted top to bottom. And that order, that ranking, it moves money, applications, and which admissions deans still have a job in the fall. Now, you would assume the LSAT score is what those rankings care about the most, but that's actually not the case anymore. Back in 2022, Yale and Harvard Law School walked away from the US News rankings. They withdrew, they refused to participate, and within weeks, dozens of other schools followed. US News blinked, they rewrote the formula, they cut the weight of your LSAT score from about 11% down to 5% and shifted more weight onto jobs and bar passage rates. And so the LSAT mattered less, at least that's what everybody assumed, but they were wrong. The LSAT matters just as much as it ever has, if not more. Because imagine it from the admissions dean's perspective. Their rankings slipped, applications are down, the board wants a plan by next Friday. And so what can you actually fix before the fall? You can't move your bar passage rate in a year. Graduate employment numbers take several years to turn around. Respect from judges and professors moves even slower than that. But there is still one number you can move in a single cycle. It is your median LSAT score. That's the middle score of your incoming class. Half of the students are above it, half are below it. Now you move that number by buying it. You find applicants with high LSAT scores and you hand them scholarship money to choose your school. That is the lever. So while the LSAT may have less weight on paper, the schools still chase it harder than ever because it's the only thing they can change in the short term before next year. A school can't buy a better bar passage rate by the fall, but it can buy your LSAT score, the one you've already earned. That is the whole game. Now, every law school with ABA accreditation has to publish something called a 509 report. It's required, it's public, you can get it for free, and it lists three numbers: the 25th percentile, the median, and the 75th percentile LSAT score of the class they just enrolled. You can look it up right now. You can Google X Law School 509, and let's say it reads 165, 168, and 180. That's their 25th, their median, and their 75th. If you walk in with a 171 LSAT score, you are above their 75th percentile. You just made their number go up, and so you're worth money to them now, and the report says it right there. Which means every admissions dean knows exactly what every rival's medians are down to the point. And they know the exact score they need this cycle to climb, to hold, or to stop sliding. So that report is the spreadsheet that runs the whole game. It turns medians into a public scoreboard that no school can hide from. And it locks every school into the same game. Let's say a dean wanted to stop chasing scores. They wanted to build a class on work experience or writing ability or sheer grit. They can't. The second their median drops, their scoreboard number drops, and their rankings drop, their applications drop, and 3 years later, that dean is updating their resume and their LinkedIn profile. So the schools, they aren't evil here. They're stuck in a system. And they've got to hit a number. But that's good number news for you as the applicants. The best leverage you ever have, you're holding the one thing they are forced to buy. The schools are in a trap to keep their numbers up. And what that means for you is there is free money on the table. If your score lands above a school's median, you pull up their median just by enrolling. You make their scoreboard number climb. If you land above their 75th percentile, you are pure profit for their stats. So they will compete for you. They will offer you cash. They'll give you half tuition, full tuition, sometimes a full ride with a stipend on top to make sure you pick them over the school down the list running the same math. If you're below their median, you get mostly nothing because you're going to drag their number down. That's the wrong direction. But if you're above their 75th percentile, you are in real negotiation territory and the offers get better and better. And even just a few points more, is worth more than you might guess. At the top of the market, by my read at least, 5 points on the LSAT can swing $50,000 to $150,000 in scholarship money over the course of 3 years. Sometimes more, because those points move you out of the will take you pile to the will take you and pay you pile. That's the top of the market, not the average. Most applicants are not going to see six figures, but even a single point at the right school is worth real money. Let's make it concrete. I worked with somebody a couple cycles back, scored a 163 the first time, solid number, gets you in plenty of places, but with no money attached. That student retook, hit a 169, same person, same GPA, same essay, same recommenders, only 6 more points, went from $0 at the target school to a full ride. That's around $230,000 across 3 years of law school for just getting 6 points more on one test. Now, keep in mind, a scholarship comes off the sticker price, not the real cost. 2 schools can both offer you half tuition, but leave you with completely different bills once you consider living costs and what the degree actually pays back. The score gets you the offer, but you've got to read the offer right. Consider all the factors that go in, including the living expenses based on the location where you are going to law school. Now, the top of the score chart is getting crowded. High scores used to be rare. A 170 made you a unicorn a couple of years ago, but the LSAT changed back in 2020 with the pandemic, changed again in 2024 with the removal of the logic games section. And now there are more and more people walking with 170s and 175s than seats at the top schools can hold. For reference, a 170 used to put you in the top 3%. Now it puts you in the top 5%. Used to be that you would get you'd be in the top 1% with a 173. Now you've got to get a 175 to be in the top 1%. And so when high scores are everywhere, the price of standing out climbs. The schools that bought a partial scholarship at a strong school 3 years ago might buy nothing today. You've got to get a higher score. The free money didn't vanish, of course. Schools are still paying it, but the bar to reach it has risen. You've got to get a higher score just to stay in competition. And so if you're applying in the next couple of years and you think you're okay with a 165, look at the most recent meetings, look up the current ABA 509 reports for the most recent data. The score inflation with the LSAT as well as the GPA inflation means the game has changed. And of course, the schools still want to buy the numbers, but they're going to want higher numbers than in the past. And if you want my help getting the highest LSAT score possible, getting into better law schools, getting more scholarship money, I'm happy to help you out. I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now and later. Open offer. You can book that free tutoring lesson with me personally at unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG. I've also put together a free LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. It's a quick reference on everything logical reasoning and reading comprehension. You can grab that free cheat sheet at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet, free download PDF. I see questions here in the chat. I will get to as many of those as I can. Feel free to drop them in. Anything at all. LSAT and law school admissions, happy to help. I see ICE is asking, would your GPA affect that? For example, say you're a splitter. And so if you are a splitter, meaning that you have a higher LSAT, a lower GPA, the good news is that a higher LSAT score can help to offset a lower GPA. That is the good news. And the extent to which you're going to need a higher LSAT depends on how low exactly your GPA is. But the good news is law schools weigh your LSAT score more heavily than your undergraduate GPA. So better to have a high LSAT and a low GPA than a high GPA and a low LSAT. And of course, regardless, if your LSAT's low, just retake the LSAT and get a higher score. The LSAT's offered 8 times a year. There's always another LSAT coming up just around the corner. And even speaking now in the end of June, you could retake the LSAT in August or September and still apply pretty early in the cycle in the fall. Yusrar is asking, what's a good source for getting a practice test to see where you stand? So you can get access to free LSAT practice tests on the LSAC Law Hub platform. They give you 4 practice tests for free with a free lsac.org account. You can get the others with a paid Law Hub Advantage subscription for $120. You get a full year of access for all the 60 or so practice tests, well worth the investment. Of course, don't over-index on that cold diagnostic result. All it's going to tell you is that you have not yet learned the language of the LSAT, but of course you can, and you can improve significantly if you put in the work, if you build a strong foundation, if you learn the different sections and the different question types. And that's, of course, what we help you do. Just checking for more questions here, folks. Feel free to keep coming them in. Shark is asking, do you need a 177 plus to get into a T14? No, you don't. I mean, the T14 LSAT medians range from 170 to 174. And so if your GPA is solid, then having a 170 to 174 could be sufficient, could be enough. But that depends on, of course, what your GPA is. You should know that for the T14 law schools, the top 14, like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Columbia, Cornell, NYU, their GPA medians are typically in the 3.9 to 4.0 range. And so if you're below a 3.9, you're going to want to have above a 174 in order to compensate. And so if your GPA is, say, a 3.6, maybe you would need a 177. Depends on the school. Of course, every cycle is unique. There's variation. Luck's a factor, softs are a factor, but it's mostly LSAT and GPA. And so if your GPA is a 3.5, like Yusrar is asking, you're going to want to have closer to 177, 180 to compensate. Whitewater's asking, got a score in the high 140s this cycle. Should I cancel the score? I mean, score cancellations are really an artifact of the time when law schools averaged multiple LSAT scores, but they no longer do. For the past 20 years, the American Bar Association policy has been to only require law schools to submit the highest LSAT scores of their matriculating students. And so if you want to cancel the low score, cancel it. If you want to keep it, doesn't really matter. Of course, if you do cancel it, law schools will assume that it didn't go very well, because if it had, you probably wouldn't have canceled, right? So all this to say, do what feels better for you, but rather than devoting energy there, I would say look ahead, look forward, think about what are you going to want to do differently for your retake prep. Retrospect is asking, with a 158 diagnostic, how long do you think it would take to hit a 176, 177? So you're looking for roughly a 20-point increase, and you want to know how long it would take. I mean, your improvement's going to be a function of the amount that you study and the way in which you study. So how many hours can you put in per week, per day? And more importantly, what study methods are you using? What kind of resources and support are you getting? The thing is that when you're self-studying, when you're studying on your own, you don't know what you don't know. But once we add some support into the mix, there's usually a pretty quick score boost, meaning there's going to be a lot of low-hanging fruit. And so typically what we'll do for a student who comes to us is we'll set up a personalized coaching program, laying out exactly what to do every single day from now till the test. That's going to cover when to drill LSAT questions by type, when to do timed sections, when to take full-length practice tests as test day approaches. We map it out literally down to the day, considering weekdays versus weekends, holidays, vacations. We give you access to live small group classes. You get an on-demand course. You get personal coaching giving you feedback on what you're getting wrong and why. For example, a lot of students are confused about the difference between necessary assumption questions and sufficient assumption questions. And if we can correct that misconception, then you might have been previously getting both question types wrong. Now you're getting both of them right. That could give you a pretty quick score boost. Even just one coaching session can turn things around, which is why I'm offering the free tutoring for everybody watching this, because I know how impactful it can be. Ice is asking, what would your ideal study plan look like, acknowledging that everybody's different? I mean, yes, everybody is different. Everybody has different weak areas, different learning styles, but there are certain steps that everybody's got to go through at some point. You got to build a strong foundation. You got to learn the different sections and the different question types. For example, in logical reasoning, you've got approximately 15 different types of questions, including strengthen, weaken, flaw, parallel, resolve, and so on. Then you've got reading comp to work on. There's also pacing and time management, doing individual sections and full-length exams to build up your endurance. You want to work through all of those phases at some point. And so we'll map those into your study plan, given what you've previously done and what you've got to work on going forward. The three most common types of logical reasoning questions are necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. So I'd probably start there before shifting focus to the less common question types. Everybody hates parallel reasoning, for example, but there are only a couple of them per exam. So I typically recommend focusing on the more common types before focusing on the less common types, since everything's worth the same. Sender's asking, does GPA really matter in life? Truth be told, probably not a whole lot of people are going to care about your undergraduate GPA once you're an attorney, but it does matter in terms of getting into law school. So, in the short term, at least, it matters to get you to the next stage. And then once you're in law school, your undergrad GPA no longer really matters, but your law school GPA matters. And of course, if your GPA is good, you're still going to want to include it on your resume, and employers may care about the law school GPA at least. VJ is asking, how do we access the free tutoring? Go to the link in my bio on TikTok or Instagram, or check the link below the video on YouTube or pinned in the chat, and you can book the free tutoring lesson with me. Again, that link is unpluggedprep.com/start. Madeline's asking, if I have a low undergraduate GPA, high graduate GPA, and a 159 LSAT, can I get into a state school, not a T14? So there's this misconception that graduate GPA matters. Unfortunately, graduate GPA does not matter. Sorry to say. Only your undergraduate GPA is factored in for the law school admissions process. Every law school publishes a law school admissions index. It's a formula where they take your undergraduate GPA and your LSAT score, they combine them together to determine your chances, for lack of a better word, and they're measuring your numbers against their medians. But graduate GPA is kind of like a soft factor where they can see it, but they're not factoring it into their calculations. And so if your undergraduate GPA is low, then you're going to want to have a higher LSAT score to compensate above their medians. And so if your undergraduate GPA is low, is a 159 LSAT going to be high? I don't know. My guess is that you'd probably want to have a higher LSAT score to offset or compensate for the lower GPA. But when you say state school, I mean, there's 50 states in the US and more law schools than that, I'm guessing, that are state. And so you want to look at the specific law schools that you're targeting. What are their medians and where do you stack up? Retrospect is asking, what LSAT would it take to compensate for a 3.7? I also have T2 Softs, Debate National Championship. Cool. Okay, so your GPA is a 3.7 is not low. If you're looking at T14 law schools, though, it is below their medians. Their medians are typically in the 3.9 range. And so the question is, how low is your GPA relative to their medians? And then that answers how high your LSAT needs to be to compensate. Hey, Leonardo, what's up? All right, so Marv is asking, wait, so my grad school grades won't hinder or improve my chances. What I'm saying is that your grad school grades are not factored into the calculations. They'll see it like a soft, but it is not factored into the calculations, not factored into the formulas or the index. If your grad school grades are low, like really low, that could be a red flag, of course. But what I'm saying is that they're not going to really be calculated in the same way. So the numbers you want to optimize and devote your attention to right now would be your LSAT score. And if you're still in undergrad, your GPA. Of course, if you're already in grad school, undergrad GPA is a done deal. Just focus on the LSAT in that case. Just scanning through for some questions I've missed here. Jamie's asking, does a high GPA bury a low LSAT score also? Not as much as a high LSAT can bury a low GPA. And that reason is simply because LSAT and GPA are not equal. Your LSAT score weighs more heavily than your undergraduate GPA. And part of that is due to rampant, significant grade inflation over the past couple of decades. Grade inflation is really out of control. And undergraduate GPAs are not really an apples to apples comparison because elite schools have more grade inflation than state schools, and humanities majors have more grade inflation than STEM majors. Hope that's not revolutionary or a shocking thing to say. I consider it to be assumed wisdom at this point for anyone who's following what's going on in higher education. Sorry if I burst anybody's bubble there. But what we got to do then is say to ourselves, okay, from the law school's perspective, if GPAs are suspect, they could, on the one hand, dig deep into, okay, which undergrads have more grade inflation than others, which majors have more grade inflation than others. That might be a more fair, transparent, accurate way to go about it, but they don't do that. And part of the reason is because it's not practical for them, given that there are thousands and thousands of undergraduate institutions which have varying degrees of grade inflation. You could even drill down to the individual professors. They're not going to do that, of course. Additionally, the bigger practical reason is that they have no incentive to, because the US News Rankings and the American Bar Association do not distinguish between GPAs earned in different contexts. The ABA is not applying any degree of nuance or detail to whether the GPA was earned in this major or that, or from this undergrad or that. So law schools just discount GPA across the board because there's more noise than signal. It's not a useful metric for them given that variation. A 3.1 in STEM is not that bad compared to a 3.1 in sociology. A 3.1 in STEM, they're like, okay, well, it's a hard major and there's a brutal curve. A 3.1 in sociology, they're like, did you even turn in your assignments? Because if you did, you probably have an A. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but only a little bit. And so the LSAT, in contrast, is a more consistent measure because it's the same exam for everybody, more or less, and everyone earned their LSAT score within the past 5 years, after which point it expires, and most people apply to law school within a couple of years of taking the LSAT. In contrast, your GPA, you might have earned it last week, you might have earned it last decade or 2 decades ago, depending on when you apply to law school if you're an older applicant. And so the LSAT becomes a more useful metric because it is more recent, and it's the same no matter who takes it. Now, there's an asterisk there because, of course, it's not entirely the same. Some people took an LSAT with logic games, some took it without logic games, some took it in person, some took it remotely, and some took it with extra time, some took it without extra time. The thing is that law schools won't know whether you took it with accommodations or not, so they can't distinguish based on that. And they have no incentive to care whether you took it with logic games or without, or in person or remote, because ultimately they're reporting the same number to the ABA regardless. And so, bottom line, LSAT's weighed more heavily. Long answer to a short question, but I think that provides some additional clarity beyond what folks may have had the context on up to this point. Scanning through for more questions here. User asks, ooh, I like this one. What's the lowest GPA to aim for to still be a realistically good contender for T14s with a 170 plus LSAT? So that's like asking, what's the lowest grade I could sneak by with and get away with and still be okay? Like, in other words, how little should I try in undergrad and maybe still be okay to get into a top law school? I see a couple issues with the framing of this question. And then this person's just user, so I'm not calling them out by name or anything. But basically, I'm not sure this is the right perspective when you want to go to a top law school to ask, how little could I get away with doing? I'd flip it and say, what is the competition doing? And given that this is a zero-sum contest, in other words, there are a limited number of seats at the most elite law schools, what would it take for me to get into these law schools? And maybe not even just get in, but also get in with scholarship money. The top 14 law schools, for context, their LSAT medians range from 170 to 174. That's top 5% to top 1% to top 5% on the LSAT side. Percentile-wise, the GPA are typically in the 3.9 to 4.0 range. And so a 170 plus LSAT just barely puts you within the LSAT medians. For GPA, you want to be in the 3.9 range at minimum. And so, like, when you say lowest GPA, I'm like, well, I guess a 3.9 doesn't feel low to me. It's low compared to a 4.0, but not everybody's getting a 4.0 unless you're taking those easy A classes. But when you want to go to a top law school and when you want to get a top outcome, like a top 1% type of outcome, you've got to approach it differently than 99% of people. And if the question was more like, my GPA is low, could I still be okay? I apologize if I was harsh, not my intention. I'm coming at this more from a place of saying, what's the best possible mindset to help you achieve an extraordinary result? If you're still an undergrad, though, maybe I took your question too literally. Like, rather than what GPA should I aim for, it's like, how could I approach this? What goal should I have in mind to get an extraordinary outcome? And I would think we want you to have a 3.940 GPA, ideally. And if your GPA is below a 3.9 right now and you're still an undergrad, I would think about taking some community college classes over the summer to help boost up the GPA, classes where you could reasonably get a 4.0 safely. Don't take hard classes that'll tank your GPA, I'm sorry to say. I wish that you could just take whatever and be fine, but the truth is that there are some classes that are more punishing than others, and you can be punished, unfortunately, for exploring topics that don't play to your strengths. If you take a class in math or STEM and STEM's not your thing, could hurt your GPA and ding you. I don't want that for you, so I'd say take easier classes where you can get a 4.0 if you need to boost up your GPA. Just speaking transparently, you got to be ruthless about this to get an extraordinary outcome. Aim for the 4.0. aim for the 180. If you're at a 170 right now, maybe the simpler path is, hey, just retake the LSAT, go for a 175. If you're at a 3.9 right now or a 3.8 or lower, take some easy 4.0 classes to boost up the GPA. Anything else is a distraction. Going for that paralegal internship, not a good use of your time, unfortunately. Going for the leadership position in the club, not a good use of your time. Of course, is it helpful? Yes, but you've got limited time, and so you've got to make priorities here. LSAT number 1, GPA number 2, everything else is a distant third, fourth, fifth. Unless you've got the LSAT and GPA locked down, don't think about the other stuff. Mohammed's asking, if you study abroad, will it be harder to get into US law schools like Oxford or London School of Economics? I don't think it'll necessarily be harder. Typically, what happens for folks who do their undergrad outside of law school, what happens is the law schools don't know how to evaluate the transcript. And so you're not getting an LSAC calculated GPA the same way you would as if you were going to law school inside the US. They'll just look at your GPA transcript and they'll say, was it above average, average, or below average? That's it. So that emphasis, that focus then gets transferred onto your LSAT score. And so you're not harmed necessarily, but your LSAT score becomes that much more important because they don't know how to evaluate your transcript and they can't be bothered to learn. Crazy, right? This is even more so the case if you earned your bachelor's in a country where English is not the primary language and they're not going to bother to devote the effort to interpret it even more so. So in short, it's not going to hurt you, but more rides on your LSAT score, which could be good, could be bad. I view it as a good thing, honestly, because the LSAT score is a single number you can focus on increasing. Undergrad is 3-4 years. It's several different classes, 8 semesters if you're on the semester system, right? So that's a lot to boost up. In contrast, the LSAT's 1 day, 2.5 hours, weighs more heavily than all of undergrad combined. So I would just say, you know what? Can we focus on getting that number up? Jake is asking, would you suggest getting a master's in AI governance if you want to write AI policy? Well, I don't know about a master's in AI. I mean, AI is moving so fast. Do you really think that the people teaching those classes know any more than you could learn on your own? I mean, it's changing by the day, changing by the week. I feel like that's one of those master's programs where it's like they're just looking for easy tuition dollars. I think if you just spent your time in the AI programs themselves, learning how to use them, especially the agentic AI that's coming out these days, like you would learn a lot more. And learning how to wield AI well and learning how to actually use these programs, that'll teach you a lot more to help you later write AI policy than getting what I would consider to be a fairly useless degree. And while I'm on the topic of useless master's degree, by the way, there are these universities offering masters in legal studies. I would steer clear of those. A master's in legal studies is like a degree where you take law classes, you pay a lot in tuition, but at the end of the degree, you can't be a lawyer. It's like you learned the lawyer stuff, you paid the tuition of a law student, but you're not getting a JD. Rather than the master's in legal studies, just go for the law degree straight up. Rather than a master's in AI, which is changing by the week and by the hour, just learn how to use AI. And if you can learn how to use AI, and you have a GitHub repo, for example, you can say that you've got agents doing X, Y, Z, and you know more than the admissions people in law school, and you can show it. They'll be impressed with that more than the master's degree because you've actually done stuff. But you don't need to pay a tuition to learn how to do it. You can learn it yourself. You can ask the AI how to learn it, and they'll tell you directly. Mohammed's asking, is poli-sci or philosophy, are these good majors for pre-law? I mean, you can major in literally anything and go to law school. Law schools do not care what you majored in. All they care about is your GPA and your LSAT score. And poli-sci philosophy, I mean, yes, they're common pre-law majors. They're not necessarily going to stand out. But if you can get a good GPA in it, I'm all for it. Interestingly, philosophy majors get better LSAT scores on average than poli-sci majors do. And the people who write LSAT questions actually have PhDs in philosophy. Then that begs the question, Does studying philosophy help you do better at the LSAT? Or are the people studying philosophy already predisposed to do well on the LSAT? It's a correlation, causation, chicken, egg sort of thing. Interesting food for thought. The ruthless path for getting a good GPA, of course, is just take classes and majors that you think you're going to do well in to begin with. I don't love that, of course. I wish you could study whatever you wanted. But for law school, maintaining good numbers is important. Same deal for linguistics, by the way. I see someone asking about linguistics. I think that would be in this similar bucket as philosophy, where it's interesting, it's maybe helpful for the LSAT, but it could also harm your GPA, so I would tread carefully. Karine is asking, if you failed law school the first time, for readmission, what's going to help you get back in? A stronger LSAT score and an addendum explaining why you will not likely fail out again. In other words, you want to address any concerns they might have about the same thing recurring. Law schools don't want their students flunking out. They want to know that if there was a personal matter, a family issue, an emergency of some kind that led you to flunk out before, that issue has been addressed, it's been resolved, not going to happen again. And of course, a higher LSAT score will also give them confidence that you've got what it takes to succeed in law school and, of course, the bar exam beyond. By the way, folks, for those just joining, I do these lives every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you're watching this. If you haven't already, I've put together a free LSAT cheat sheet PDF you can download. It's unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet for the link. You can grab it in my bio on TikTok and Instagram. It's the link below the video on YouTube and pinned in the chat on YouTube as well. Woodman asks, I'm currently at a 160 LSAT score. Is it worth applying for the top 14? Trying for a 170, but it's not going well. I can't break a 167. To be honest, I would say you're probably best off getting that LSAT score up 10 points, or at least 7-10 points before you apply. It's a long shot with a 160, no matter what your GPA is. I'm sorry to hear it's not going well. The question is, what are you currently doing with your LSAT prep? How are you currently approaching it? Is there a resource? Is there a support system that you have not yet taken advantage of that you think would boost up your score? Are you self-studying on your own with textbooks in ChatGPT, or are you taking a proper course? Are you getting coaching? Are you getting support? If you want to talk through prep options, I'm here to help. You can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. We could talk through your prep plan together and figure out an action plan to help you get your score up. Because the thing is that when you're studying on your own, you don't know what you don't know. But once we add some support into the mix, there's usually a pretty quick score boost, meaning there's going to be a lot of low-hanging fruit. So if you want to talk through that prep program, I'm here to help you out. Justin's asking, would 4 years of experience in research, behavioral, and author or co-authoring published papers be enough to help along with a good LSAT score to make up for a 3.0 GPA? I mean, the research is cool. The papers are cool. Those are essentially soft factors, though. They're not quantified in the same way as your LSAT score and your GPA. So they're nice to have. Definitely include them on your resume. Talk about them in your application essays if you can. Get related letters of rec if you can. But the best way to offset a 3.0 GPA is to not just have a good LSAT score, but to have a great LSAT score. So I'd be thinking about, how can we take that LSAT score from good to great? Can we get it up 5-10 points more? Speaking now at the end of June, you've still got time to retake the LSAT in August or September, get another 5-10 points, and you can apply at the beginning of the cycle in the fall. So reach out and book the free tutoring with me if you haven't already. I'll be back Monday, same time, same place. I'll see you all then. In the meantime, all the best. Take care. Thanks for joining.